Since the launch of Un'Goro, I think it's safe to say that Hearthstone has changed quite a bit. Not only have we got an entirely new set, we've also lost a few sets that have rotated out of standard. So that means that we need to make a new list of the legendary cards that you should craft right now. Bear in mind that these cards are only neutral because I feel like these should be cards that can be fit into more than one deck rather than just locking you into one class. There'll be a separate list soon for the best class legendaries. Firstly, a couple of honourable mentions. Now, Finger the Flying Star is seeing a play in a couple of decks right now. We've got the Paladin, which is running Murlocs and also Finger. It works as a nice package in that, and Egg Druid as well, so it's definitely something that should be considered for those kind of lists. And also we're seeing Elise the Trailblazer, which would be my one neutral recommendation from this expansion, although I don't feel like any of the neutrals in Un'Goro are really must-crafts over other things on this list. And without further ado, first on my list, Alexstrasza. Kind of a staple in a lot of kind of freeze mage decks and sometimes control decks as well. Alexstrasza can fit both the slot of bursting your opponent down to 15 if you haven't dealt any damage to them, and then you follow up with a couple of fireballs and a frostbow or your pyroblast. So it's seeing play in quite a few mage decks right now. We've got a couple of control mages going around right now. We've got discover mage, and also freeze mage is still a thing as well. It can also fit into things like control warrior, at least it used to. Definitely one to put on your watch list. Next up is Arya Blackpaw. So the Jade Golem decks were a little bit more dominant last time I made this list when we had the Gadgets Arm set and the 2015 cards. Now that they're gone, the sets have those kind of decks have become less oppressive. I don't think that Jade Shaman, Jade Druid and Jade Rogue, not like we ever really saw that one, really run the metagame anymore, but they are there. So if you're looking for a card that's going to give you a couple of different options, maybe Arya Blackpaw is for you. Most notably in Shaman, you don't have to entirely base your game plan around the Jade Golems. They're just really nice mid-range cards and tools. And there's still Jade Druid, which recently did quite well in a couple of tournaments. People have been running that here and there after a lot of the Un'Goro hype has settled down a little bit. People have gone back to these kind of cards to see where they can fit, so Jade Druid is not as crazy as it used to be, but I'd say it's still pretty fun and pretty viable if you're not up against too much aggro on the ladder. Arya Blackpaw is still a really good legendary because it means if you've got at least one or two ticks on your Jade Golem counter, it's going to summon a 3/3 and then when it dies summon a 4/4. It's just pretty good and it's going to give you value, and it will give you a couple of new decks to play around with if you craft this one. Now on to the big three. I think these three should definitely be in your collection by now if they aren't already, and I think the first one is Leroy Jenkins. If you're an aggro player, Leroy Jenkins is pretty important to that. It's going to be your finisher in almost every single aggressive list. It's going to go in your Pirate Warrior. It's going to go in your Miracle Rogue. Not like that's an aggro deck, but it's good in combo decks as well. Aggro Paladin, Aggro Druid, it can fit in there as well. Leroy just fills in all of those slots. Perhaps one of the most versatile legendaries, even though it doesn't look that great, is Blood Mage Faunos. It's going to fit into your Shaman list because they have a lot of spell power. It's going to fit into your Mage lists in all kind of varieties because it's going to give you spell power, and it's also going to fit into all of your Rogue lists as well. Not only does it give you spell power, it also gives you draw, so it does two things in one card for the cost of one stat point over Leponome. That's pretty important, and Blood Mage Faunos is just a 1/1, and yet it's one of the most important legendaries to date since Hearthstone launched. There has only been a couple of times in Hearthstone's history where Blood Mage Faunos wasn't in a meta deck, and while it doesn't completely change the tide of the game, it's a good adhesive, it's a good glue that sticks together all of the elements of, say, a Miracle Rogue deck together. Your backstabs are going to deal 3, your eviscerates are going to deal 5. And the final card is still Patches the Pirate. If anything, Patches the Pirate has gotten better since the launch of Un'Goro, and a lot of cards have rotated out of standard. So let me explain that. Pirate Warrior has not really lost much at all. It's still one of the best decks in the game. It's still going to be one of the quickest ways to ladder up. And if you want to do that deck, Patches is going to fit in it really well, and it's just going to take it to the next level. But not only that, Patches the Pirate is so good, it makes running Pirates in Druid a thing. So you've got Egg Druid running patches and a pirate that pulls patches out. You've got things like Aggro Paladin that runs patches, and you get a pirate in there and it pulls patches out, and suddenly you have an early game. It's really good, and it's only a 1-1, and it seemingly doesn't do much, but it just adds that extra little oomph in the early game. And as you guys probably know by now, sometimes Hearthstone is decided in those first few turns, and you can snowball so quickly with patches that it is, quite frankly, ridiculous. So, pretty ironic that 2 of the legendaries in my top 5 legendary lists are both 1-1s. Not exactly exciting, but I think we've covered a wide array of legendaries. We went from Alexstrasza to a turn 1 play, in literally that order actually. It's in declining mana cost. So those are the legendaries that I recommend you craft if you want to get a good ratio of value for dust and also viability on the ladder. That doesn't mean that the class legendaries aren't better, and in a lot of situations they are, but I don't think they provide as much value for dust because they can't be played, theoretically, in every single deck. With that in mind, I'll be back very soon with my top quests and top class legendaries. Not entirely sure how I'm going to do it yet. Let me know if you want to see that by leaving a like on this video. It means a lot, and of course, if you want to see more Hearthstone and other gaming stuff, head on over to Zoid Gaming and hit subscribe.